Last night at 10 o'clock, when I was getting ready to go to sleep, I got a call from an unknown number in our city. The voice on the line, clear and pleasant, asked, "Are you Jen Middleton?" I didn't hesitate and said, "Yes, that's me." "Who's this?" Instead of answering, the woman laughed and said, "Your husband is so wild in bed." I was completely confused and was about to ask who she was and how she knew anything about my husband, but the call was abruptly cut off, leaving a dial tone. At first, I thought it was just a prank and didn't think much of it. But as soon as I hung up the phone, a troubling thought crossed my mind. If it was just a prank, how did the caller know my name so accurately? Lost in my thoughts, I received a video through text from the same unknown number, followed by a message. Don't believe it? Take a close look at the true colors of your husband, Max Jennings. Even the mention of my husband's name, Max Jennings, was alarmingly accurate. A few seconds after my mind went blank, curiosity got the better of me, and I pressed play. Instantly, the sound of a woman moaning loudly came from my phone, shockingly loud against the silence of my bedroom. I quickly turned the volume down. Once I had calmed down, I glanced at the screen. It showed a hotel room with a king-sized bed, clothes strewn all over the floor, and two bodies intertwined, a sight so explicit I could only describe it as downright obscene. I was infuriated, thinking to myself, who would be so thoughtless as to send a pornographic video to a pregnant woman in the middle of the night? Just as I was about to turn it off, a familiar voice came from the video. "My little pussy cat, twice isn't enough for you?" It felt like a bucket of cold water had been poured over me. I froze and stared intently at my phone screen. Then, the man's face appeared. He was slapping the woman's behind and boasting smugly, "Do you want to drain me completely?" I was stunned. My entire body went rigid. The man in the video was my husband, Max, who was supposed to be on a business trip in North City. It felt like a bolt from the blue, completely paralyzing my ability to think. I forced myself to calm down and watched the video several times. Eventually, I was certain it wasn't doctored. Even the timestamp in the top right corner showed tonight's date, just minutes ago. This means that my husband, Max Jennings, was using his business trip as a cover to cheat on me with his mistress in a hotel. Seeing Max's face in the video, a face I could recognize even if it were burned to ashes, left me utterly devastated. Just last night, Max called me, complaining about how difficult the client was, saying, "If I don't drink myself under the table tonight, we won't secure the contract." He apologized profusely. "Baby, I'm sorry. As soon as I sober up tomorrow morning, I'll fly right back. Your giving birth is a big deal, and I must be by your side to witness the birth of our baby." Over the past few years, many entrepreneurs have faced severe losses due to the pandemic and a tough economic climate. Although Max lost some money, he wasn't hit as hard as others. After I became pregnant, he said he needed to create a good life for our baby, which meant working harder than ever to earn money. He often drank to the point of blacking out, missing his flights, and getting stranded. I felt sorry for him, constantly networking for the company's benefit, and told him not to rush, to take his time, and come back when he was ready. I was only 39 weeks pregnant, not yet at my due date, and I told him not to worry. Looking back now, my accommodating attitude seems almost laughable. Were the days he got drunk and missed his flights really spent at business meetings? As someone who cannot stand deceit, I immediately called Max. However, he hung up after just 2 rings. Shortly after, Max sent a voice message through WhatsApp. "I'm in a meeting right now, babe. Can't talk on the phone, but I miss you." A meeting? Is that what he calls being in bed with another woman? Filled with grief and rage, I was about to call him again when I received another video from the same person. This new video was even more disgusting and infuriating. It took every ounce of courage I had to tremulously tap open the second video clip. In the video, Max was shown bathing in a transparent glass shower, and 2 used condoms were lying on the carpet. The mistress purposefully zoomed in and asked Max in the video, "Max, you're so naughty, lying to your wife about being busy with work out of town." "How else would I find time to be with you?" he replied. "Isn't she about to give birth? Shouldn't you be there for her?" Max responded nonchalantly, "What's so special about a woman giving birth? If I were there, would it make her suffer any less?" "You bad boy. Is it because your wife is pregnant and it's inconvenient that you can't bear to touch her, and now you're so horny? Tonight, I almost broke under you. Do you think she tastes as good as you?" Max scoffed dismissively. "Even if she wasn't pregnant, I would be too lazy to touch her." "Liar, if you're too lazy to touch her, how did she get pregnant? Could it be that the child in her belly is from another man?" Max did not respond. The woman pressed on. "So, Max, when are you actually going to divorce her?" Max spoke in a soothing tone. "Baby, please be patient, okay? Now is not the right time. I will not go back on my promise to you. The woman sounded annoyed. Then tell me, when is the right time? Wait until she. The video abruptly ended there. Even though I knew it was the mistress intentionally provoking me, I still fell into her trap. I immediately called her and demanded, "Who exactly are you?" She seemed to anticipate my call and calmly replied, "Who I am doesn't matter. What matters is that I just slept with your husband." I could hear the sound of running water through the phone. Max must have been showering, which gave her the audacity to openly taunt me. My heart twisted in pain, and I clenched my teeth to hold back tears as I snapped, "Don't you have any shame?" "I wouldn't be stealing your husband if I had any shame," she casually laughed, taunting me further. "Jen, if you really care, why don't you just divorce him and make space for me?" "You." I was about to hurl back an insult when suddenly Max's voice came through the phone. "Baby, who are you talking to?" "Your wife," the woman playfully cooed. Max chuckled and said, "Baby, you're so naughty. Do you really not believe me?" "I believe you. Let her listen closely to how I make love to you." Then, the phone transmitted a series of vile and indecent flirtations. I figured the woman had hidden the phone, deliberately letting me hear the disgusting sounds of her and Max being intimate in bed. Disgusted to the core, I hung up the phone. Today, I discovered a hidden side of my husband, who had been seen as a devoted and exemplary spouse for many years. Tears streamed down my face as my heart felt like it was being ripped apart. During the early stages of my pregnancy, I struggled with low progesterone and severe morning sickness. Even a sip of water would make me vomit. The doctor recommended bed rest, and Max insisted that I quit my job to focus on the pregnancy. With more time at home, I often found myself scrolling through the internet and stumbling upon various posts by pregnant women whose husbands had cheated on them during their pregnancies. Occasionally, I would share these posts with Max, expressing my shock and dismay. How could a man betray his wife when she was going through such a life-threatening ordeal, risking her life to bring their child into the world? Max would always comfort me, assuring me that if he ever cheated, I should grind him up and use him to plaster the walls or throw him down the drain, wishing him misfortune in this life and the next. He would also say, "Baby, don't worry about such nonsense. Nothing could make my love for you fade away. You have my whole heart for my whole life." I used to believe with certainty that while any man in the world might cheat, my Max never would. How foolish that belief seems now, doesn't it? Max, who was 2 years ahead of me in college, caught my eye during freshman orientation, and it was love at first sight. Clad in a white shirt and black casual pants, Max stood tall at 6 feet, boasting a lean and beautiful physique reminiscent of a masterpiece crafted by skilled sculptors. Emerging from beneath the lush camphor trees along the campus path, he waved and smiled, with the bright sunlight casting a dappled glow upon him, his eyes sparkling. It was impossible not to be captivated. Once we began dating, I learned that Max was enrolled in the business school while I pursued studies in the School of Foreign Languages. On the day we met, he mistook me for a business school freshman and kindly carried my luggage all the way to my dorm. It was only upon reaching the entrance to my dorm building that he realized I belonged to a different department. However, driven by his love at first sight, he boldly continued with his mistake. He confessed to me that from the moment he laid eyes on me, he knew that if he let me walk away, he would regret it for the rest of his life. When Max Jennings pursued me, he displayed both proactivity and romance. In the winter, I had a tendency to sleep in late. To ensure that I could enjoy a cup of hot coffee from the cafeteria, Max would purchase one early in the morning, keep it warm inside his jacket, and patiently wait beneath my dormitory until I slowly made my way downstairs. By the time I drank it, the coffee was still warm. Whenever we went hiking, Max would pack a bag filled with snacks, fruit, and 2 flasks, one with cold water and the other with hot water. He ensured that regardless of whether I desired a cold or hot drink, he could instantly provide it. I felt like a pampered princess, and he promised a lifetime of gentle companionship and attentive care. There are numerous examples of his thoughtfulness and devotion. Even after we got together, Max's thoughtfulness and devotion never wavered. Max came from a humble rural background. His father passed away early, leaving him with 3 older sisters who were all married with children. Raised by his mother under challenging circumstances, he grew up in a financially struggling household. He once shared with me, "Jen, you probably can't imagine what it's like to fear that your house might be blown away during a storm, right? Having grown up in hardship, I've learned to truly cherish my loved ones and to respect my parents and elders." A wise man once said, "People who grow up in hardship often develop psychological shadows that can lead to abnormal behaviors." These issues manifest as a persistent hostility towards society and people, an inability to trust anyone, and a lack of sympathy. Being overly frugal or excessively focused on money is just a minor symptom of these deeper psychological issues. In contrast, those who are broad-minded and insightful, despite growing up under difficult circumstances, tend to be more compassionate and generous. They understand life and appreciate its sweet and bitter aspects. At that time, I believed Max was the latter. I felt proud of him. During the summer of his second year in grad school, Max took on a job wearing a heavy mascot costume in the plaza to distribute flyers, all to buy me a necklace for my birthday. Despite the intense heat, when I brought him lunch, he was soaked with sweat but still insisted to me that he wasn't hot at all. He said, "Jen, even though I can't afford expensive gifts right now, believe me, I will work hard to give you a better life." He proposed to me, vowing that we would stay together forever. That day, I brought him home for dinner to tell my parents that we were getting married and to seek their blessing. It was Max's first time meeting my parents. At the dinner table, Max appeared slightly tense. Despite normally exuding confidence and being outgoing as the head of the student council, that evening marked the first time I had seen him nervous. Quietly, he led me out onto the balcony and asked with a touch of apprehension in his voice, "Jen, why didn't you tell me that your dad is the dean of our business school?" I wrapped my arms around his waist and playfully asked, "Would you still pursue me if you knew my dad holds a prominent position here?" Max's expression turned serious as he replied, "Absolutely. I like you for who you are, not because of your father's status." Nestling into his embrace, I felt content and said, "Well, that settles it. It doesn't matter who my dad is as long as we're together." Later, after Max had left, my dad called me into his study for a heart-to-heart conversation. He advised me to deeply consider marrying Max. Our families were not on equal footing, and marriage is a serious matter that requires careful thought. Initially, I thought my dad was solely fixated on Max's background and family situation. I even accused him of being old-fashioned and clinging to outdated notions of social status. But my dad shook his head and said, "Jen, marriage should not be based solely on impulsive feelings. Do you truly know the man you plan to spend your life with?" My parents cautioned me against rushing into marriage and suggested waiting until after I completed graduate school. At that time, I had just been accepted into a postgraduate program and was mindful of the heavy workload ahead, so I agreed with Max to postpone our plans until after graduation.
Mux was incredibly intelligent.
He understood that my parents would not approve of our relationship. Holding me tightly, he said, "Jen, I will need some time to prove to your parents that I deserve their trust for a lifetime." However, tragedy struck the following summer. My parents were involved in a car accident and passed away before I had the chance to say goodbye. During those days, I was overwhelmed with grief, and tears were constantly streaming down my face. Max was always there for me, holding me close and reassuring me, saying, "Jen, please don't cry. You are not alone. I am here for you, through thick and thin." 3 months later, Max and I got married. We did not have a lavish wedding, as the pain of our loss was still fresh. Instead, we knelt before my parents' graves. Max humbly bowed his head in front of their resting place and promised to be by my side for the rest of our lives. However, even the most solemn promises can be broken over time. Just in our second year of marriage, he strayed. To make matters worse, it happened while I was pregnant with our child. The silence that followed the disconnected call was absolute, broken only by the heavy, rhythmic thrumming of my own blood in my ears. I sat on the edge of our bed, the bed Max and I had chosen together, laughing about how we would fill it with pillows and, eventually, a baby. I looked down at my swollen belly. The baby kicked, a sharp, sudden movement that made me gasp. For a second, a wave of intense nausea washed over me. A physical reaction to the sheer disgust curling in my gut. He was supposed to be in North City. He was supposed to be drinking himself sick. For a client. I stared at the glowing screen of my phone. The 2 videos sat there in our WhatsApp chat, tiny squares containing the absolute annihilation of the past 7 years of my life. My thumb hovered over the play button of the second video again. Every instinct screamed at me to delete it, to throw the phone against the wall, to pretend I had never seen the cheap glass shower or heard the casual, dismissive tone in Max's voice. What's so special about a woman giving birth? If I were there, would it make her suffer any less? The words repeated in my head, cold and precise. This was the man who, just 3 months ago, had stayed up until 3 in the morning massaging my swollen calves, whispering into my hair about how strong I was, how much he admired me for carrying our child. It wasn't just a betrayal of the flesh. It was a systematic, cold-blooded performance. Suddenly, a terrifying clarity cut through the fog of my grief. If Max was this comfortable lying to me, if he had built an entire parallel persona of the doting, self-sacrificing husband while harboring such utter contempt for me behind my back, what else had he lied about? Wait until she. The mistress's question had been about divorce. Max's answer had cut off.
Wait.
Until she what? Wait until she gives birth? Wait until she is vulnerable, recovering from major abdominal surgery or a grueling labor, to hand her the papers? Or was it something worse? I stood up, my legs trembling so violently I had to grip the nightstand for support. I walked over to the full-length mirror in the corner of the room. The woman staring back at me looked unrecognizable. Her eyes were red and hollow, her hair disheveled, her hands clutching her pregnant stomach as if trying to shield the child inside from the toxic reality outside. No, I whispered to my reflection. You're not going to break down.
Not
Tonight. I had to think. I had to protect my baby, and I had to protect myself. At 39 weeks pregnant, any sudden stress could trigger labor. If I lost control now, I would end up in the hospital, completely helpless, with Max holding all the power as my legal next of kin. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. My father had always told me, when you are blinded by emotion, look at the numbers. The numbers never lie, and they never have a change of heart. My father, the former dean of the business school. I began logging into our joint bank accounts. Over the past year, Max had insisted on managing all our finances, claiming that my pregnancy was too difficult for me to worry about bills and investments. I had trusted him, implicitly, but as I went through the transaction history, a pattern emerged. Large sums of money, amounts ranging from $10,000 to $50,000, had been transferred out of our joint savings account into an overseas business account under the name Jennings Holdings. I had never heard of this entity. More terrifyingly, I looked at the digital copies of our insurance policies. There was a newly active life insurance policy under my name, taken out just 6 months ago. The premium was incredibly high, and the payout was $5 million in the event of my accidental death or death due to medical complications. The beneficiary wasn't our child. It was Max. My breath hitched. My father's warning from years ago echoed in the quiet room. Do you truly know the man you plan to spend your life with? I closed the laptop slowly, my hands ice cold. I realized then that I wasn't just dealing with an unfaithful husband. I was dealing with a predator who had been waiting for the perfect moment to strip me of everything my parents had left behind. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Max's smug face in the video, boasting about how easy I was to fool. At 7 in the morning, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Max. Morning. Sweetheart. Just woke up. Head hurts like crazy from the drinking last night, but we got the contract signed. Heading to the airport now. Can't wait to come home and rub your feet. Love you so much. I stared at the screen, a bitter taste rising in my throat. The sheer audacity of his text made me shudder. If I hadn't received those videos, I would have responded with worry, telling him to drink some warm water and take an aspirin. Instead, I typed, "That's wonderful, Max, safe travels. Text me when you land." I needed to buy time. I couldn't let him know that I knew.
not yet.
As soon as I sent the text, I called Uncle David. David Vance had been my father's closest friend and our family's legal advisor for decades. He was a seasoned estate lawyer who had tried to help me sort through my parents' estate after the accident, though back then, I had been too grief-stricken to pay much attention, leaving most of the paperwork to Max.
Yen?
Is everything all right? David's warm, gravelly voice came through the line, immediately grounding me. You're very close to your due date, aren't you? Uncle David, I need your help, I said, my voice cracking despite my efforts to remain steady. I need to see you.
Right now.
Please don't tell Max. There was a brief pause on the other end, the professional shift in David's demeanor almost palpable. I'll be at my office in 30 minutes. Come through the private back entrance. I'll have my secretary let you in. 40 minutes later, I was sitting in a plush leather chair in David's quiet, mahogany-lined office, holding a warm cup of decaf tea that I couldn't bring
Myself to drink.
I handed him my phone. Without a word, David watched the 2 videos. His face grew increasingly grim, his jaw clenching tightly. When the second video ended, he set the phone down and looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and deep pity.
Yen?
I am so sorry, he said softly. Your father would be absolutely furious. I don't have time to grieve, Uncle David, I said, squeezing my hands together to stop them from shaking. I found some transfers. Max has been moving money into something called Jennings Holdings, and there's a life insurance policy. David's expression hardened. He leaned forward, pulling up a file on his computer. I've actually been doing some quiet digging of my own over the last few months, Jen. I didn't want to alarm you during your pregnancy, but something about how Max handled your father's intellectual property rights after the accident didn't sit right with me. What do you mean? Your father developed a proprietary financial modeling software during his tenure at the business school, David explained, turning the screen toward me. It was worth millions. After his death, because you were the sole heir, the rights transferred to you. Max had you sign a power of attorney while you were heavily medicated and grieving, giving him the authority to manage those rights. He sold them to an offshore shell company, which I now suspect is Jennings Holdings, for a fraction of their worth, effectively buying them from himself. I felt the room spin. So, he took my father's life's work?
Yes.
And he's been using the royalties to fund his own business ventures and, clearly, his lifestyle. But there's more. The trust fund your father set up for you has a very specific clause. David looked at me gravely. The bulk of the principal, nearly $3 million, is locked. It can only be accessed under two conditions. Either you reach the age of 35 or you give birth to a living child, at which point the funds are released to you with your spouse listed as the co-trustee if you are married. The puzzle pieces fell into place with a sickening thud. Wait until He wasn't waiting to divorce me. He was waiting for me to give birth. Once the baby was born, the $3 million from my father's trust would be unlocked. And if something happened to me during childbirth, something that could be easily covered up or framed as a tragic medical complication, Max would inherit the entire $3 million plus the $5 million life insurance payout and have full custody of our child, which would give him complete control over the trust. I pressed my hand to my mouth, a sob escaping my throat. He wants me to.
David.
He doesn't just want a divorce. He wants me dead. We don't know that for sure, Jen, but we cannot take any risks, David said, his voice dropping to a fierce, protective whisper. Your safety and the safety of your child are the absolute priorities right now. Here is what we are going to do. Max returned home that afternoon. I was lying in bed, pretending to sleep, when I heard the front door open. The familiar sound of his footsteps down the hallway, usually a source of comfort, now sent a cold shiver of dread down my spine. Babe, his voice called out, soft and dripping with simulated tenderness. He opened the bedroom door. He looked tired, his hair slightly messy, wearing the same white shirt from the day before, the shirt I now knew had been crumpled on the floor of a cheap hotel room. He walked over to the bed and leaned down to kiss my forehead. I had to force every muscle in my body not to pull away, not to scream at him. The scent of his cologne, mixed with a faint, unfamiliar floral perfume, hit my
nose.
It took everything I had to open my eyes and smile weakly. You're back, I whispered. I missed you so much, he said, sitting on the edge of the bed and taking my
hand.
His fingers were warm, but to me, they felt like ice. The flight was delayed and my head is still pounding, but I'm just glad to be home. How are you feeling? Any contractions? A few mild ones, but nothing consistent. I lied, gently pulling my hand away to rub my temples. I'm just really tired, Max. Of course you are. You're doing the hard work. He patted my leg.
The doctor
at the private hospital said we should be ready to go in at a moment's notice. I've already prepared the hospital bag. The private hospital Max had booked was a small, secluded clinic on the outskirts of the city, owned by one of his business associates. He had insisted it was more private and had better service than the major university hospital downtown. Now, I knew why. In a small, private clinic run by his friend, a medical complication during labor would be much easier to manage and much harder to investigate. Actually, Max, I said, keeping my voice soft and passive. I was thinking, since my father used to work closely with the medical school at the university hospital, maybe we should go there instead? I feel like I'd be safer with their specialists. Max's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. A flash of irritation crossed his eyes before his face settled back into a mask of gentle concern. Oh, sweetheart, we talked about this, he said, his voice smooth.
The
university hospital is always so crowded and chaotic. With the pandemic, aftermath, and understaffing, you won't get the personalized care you need.
At Dr.
Vance's clinic, you'll have a private suite and a dedicated team of doctors who only answer to us. Trust me, I only want what's best for you and the baby. Who only answer to us. Or rather, who only answer to him. You're right, I murmured, turning my head away. I'm just overthinking.
Saw the.
Don't apologize, baby. You're just anxious. He stood up, stretching.
I'm going to take a quick shower.
I feel dirty from the travel. As soon as the bathroom door closed and the sound of running water filled the room, I slipped out of bed. I walked quietly to his jacket, which he had thrown over the chair. My heart was beating in my throat. I reached into the pocket and pulled out his
phone.
I knew his passcode. It was our anniversary date. I unlocked it and quickly opened his WeChat and WhatsApp. There was no contact saved under the name Mistress, but there was a pinned chat with a contact named Sarah. I opened it. The last message was from her, sent just 20 minutes ago. Is the pregnant cow still clueless? Make sure she doesn't suspect anything. I don't want to wait much longer, Max. My patience is wearing thin. Max's reply, she's completely brainless, Sarah. She thinks I'm her savior. Just a few more days. Once the kid is out and the trust is unlocked, we'll have everything we need. Keep your head down. My hands shook so violently, I nearly dropped the phone. I took my own phone out, snapped quick photos of the screen, and sent them to David. Then I deleted the sent messages from my phone, locked Max's phone, and slipped it back into his jacket pocket just as the shower water stopped. I made it back to the bed just in time, pulling the covers over myself. I realized then that I couldn't wait for my due date. If I stayed in this house, if I went to that private clinic, my baby, and I might not make it out alive. I had to orchestrate my own escape, and I had to do it before Max realized I was onto him. Over the next 48 hours, David and I worked in absolute secrecy. Through his legal connections, David arranged for me to be admitted under an assumed name to the high-security maternal ward at the city's top university hospital. He also contacted a forensic accountant to trace the exact path of the money Max had stolen, and a private investigator to shadow Max and Sarah. The investigator discovered that Sarah was Sarah Jennings, not a relative, but actually a woman Max had met during his college years. In fact, they had been together before Max met me. Max had met me by accident at freshman orientation.
He had targeted me. He
knew exactly who my father was. He knew about my family's wealth, my father's software, and my status as an only child. He had spent years playing the role of the perfect, self-sacrificing partner, patiently waiting for the right moment to harvest the fruits of his long con. The realization was a knife to my chest, but it also burned away the last remnants of my love for him. What remained was a cold, hard resolve. On Thursday night, while Max was supposedly at a late-night business dinner, I packed a single small bag with my essential documents, my parents' old photo albums, and a few clothes. Just as I was about to walk out the door to the taxi David had arranged, the front door unlocked. Max walked in. He wasn't supposed to be home for another 3 hours. He stared at me, his eyes dropping to the suitcase in my hand. The warm, gentle husband mask was entirely gone, replaced by a cold, calculating coldness that made my skin crawl. "Where are you going, Jen?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. I took a step back, my hand instinctively protecting my stomach. I was feeling some sharp pains, Max. I thought I should go to the hospital. I didn't want to disturb your dinner. Max closed the door behind him and locked it. The click of the deadbolt sounded like a gunshot in the quiet apartment. "You're lying," he said, taking a slow step toward me. "You didn't call Dr. Vance's clinic. I called them 10 minutes ago to check in, and they said they hadn't heard from you. And why would you pack a suitcase of old photos just to go to the hospital?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "And why did my accountant tell me today that our overseas accounts have been frozen by a court order initiated by David Vance?" My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The moment of confrontation had arrived sooner than expected, and I was entirely alone in the apartment with him. "You know, Jen," Max said, his voice eerily calm as he walked closer, "I really wanted to do this the easy way. I really did. You were supposed to have a quiet, tragic complication at the clinic. It happens all the time during childbirth. The doctors would have done their best, but alas, some things are out of our hands. You're a monster," I whispered, tears of terror and rage finally spilling over my eyelashes. You plan to murder me. Murder is such an ugly word. Max scoffed, his face twisting into a sneer. Let's call it a reallocation of assets. Your father was a pompous academic who looked down on me from the moment we met. He thought he was so smart, warning you about social status. He didn't realize that guys like me who grow up with nothing know exactly how to take what we want. He lunged forward and grabbed my arm, his grip like a vice. You're coming with
Me.
we're going to Dr. Vance's clinic right now. The doctor is waiting. Get your hands off me. I screamed, struggling against his grip. But at 39 weeks pregnant, I had no physical leverage. Max dragged me toward the door, his face contorted with desperation. He knew that if he didn't get me to his clinic, if the legal freeze on his accounts held, he would lose everything he had spent a decade building. Suddenly, a sharp, white-hot pain bloomed in my lower back and radiated through my abdomen. It was so intense my knees buckled, and I collapsed onto the hardwood floor. My water had broken. The stress of the confrontation had triggered active labor. Max stared down at me, a cruel, triumphant smile spreading across his face. Well, look at that. It looks like timing is on my side after all. He reached down to grab my shoulders to drag me out, but before he could touch me, the front door of our apartment was violently kicked open. Two police officers burst into the entryway, their weapons drawn, followed closely by Uncle David. Police, don't move. Step away from the woman. One of the officers yelled. Max froze, his hands in the air, his face pale as all the color drained from his
Skin.
Officers, you have it wrong. My wife is in labor. I was just trying to take her to the hospital. Save it, Jennings, David growled, stepping past the police to kneel beside me, his face filled with worry. Jen, are you okay? The baby is coming, I gasped, clutching David's sleeve as another wave of intense pain ripped through me. An ambulance is already downstairs, David said, shielding me as the police officers tackled Max to the ground, slamming his face into the hardwood floor. You can't do this, Max screamed, his voice cracking with rage as the handcuffs clicked into place. She has no proof. Everything I did was legal.
It's my
Money. We have your text messages, Max, David said quietly, looking down at him with utter disgust. We have the forensic audit of Jennings Holdings. We have Sarah's confession. She was arrested an hour ago trying to flee the country with your shared passport and bank drafts. She sang like a canary to avoid an accessory to attempted murder charge. Max's eyes widened in sheer, helpless terror. The realization that his entire empire of lies had collapsed in a single evening finally broke him. He began to sob, his arrogance vanishing, replaced by the pathetic whimpering of a man who had finally been caught. The paramedics rushed into the room with a gurney, quickly lifting me up.
as
They wheeled me out of the apartment, past the shattered door and the weeping man who had once been my entire world. I felt a strange, profound sense of
peace.
the illusion was over. The nightmare was ending. The labor was the most physically exhausting experience of my life, a grueling 12-hour ordeal that tested the very limits of my strength. But throughout every contraction, every moment of agony, I held onto one thought. I am free.
My
Baby is safe. At 8:14 the next morning, inside the secure, bright delivery room of the university hospital, the room was filled with the sharp, beautiful sound of a baby's first cry. It's a girl, Jen, the doctor said, placing the warm, crying bundle onto my chest. I looked down at her. She had a mop of dark hair and tiny, perfect fingers that immediately reached out and clutched my gown. Tears, warm and clean, streamed down my cheeks. Hello, sweet girl, I whispered, kissing her forehead. I named her Clara, after my mother. For the first 3 days, Uncle David stayed by my side, acting as the protective barrier between me and the outside world. He handled the police statements, the media inquiries, and the mountain of legal paperwork. Max's arrest had sent shockwaves through the local business community. The story of the dean's daughter, who had been systematically targeted by her husband, became the talk of the city. But inside my hospital room, the world was quiet, smelling of baby lotion and fresh flowers. On the 4th day, David came in with a folder of documents. The court has granted an emergency sole custody order, Jen, David said, sitting in the chair beside my bed as I nursed Clara. Max will never have legal rights to this child. The overseas funds have been successfully recovered, and placed back into your father's trust, which is now fully unlocked and under your sole control. The patent rights for your father's software have also been returned to your name. And Max? I asked, my voice calm. He's being held without bail, David replied, a satisfied smile touching his lips. Between the grand larceny, the fraud, the embezzlement, and the evidence of conspiracy to commit murder, he is looking at 25 to 30 years in a maximum security facility. Sarah is looking at 10. They will never bother you again. I looked down at Clara, who had fallen asleep, her tiny chest rising and falling
Peacefully.
Thank you, Uncle David, I said softly, for saving us. I didn't save you, Jen, David said, his eyes crinkling with warmth. You saved yourself. Your father would be so incredibly proud of your strength. 6 months later, the autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and damp earth.
I
Stood in front of my parents' graves, holding Clara, who was wrapped in a thick, pink knitted blanket. The headstone was clean, the grass around it neatly trimmed. I placed a bouquet of fresh white lilies, my mother's favorite, at the base of the stone.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, Dad, I whispered, the wind gently rustling the camphor trees above us. I brought Clara to see you. For a long time, I had avoided coming here, carrying a heavy weight of guilt.
I
Had felt that I had failed them, that I had ignored my father's warnings and let a monster desecrate our family. But as I stood there in the quiet graveyard, looking at my daughter's bright, curious eyes, the guilt finally washed away. I had survived. I had protected their legacy, and I had brought a new life into the world, free from the shadows of deceit. My father's software company was now running successfully under a professional management team I had personally vetted. I had returned to graduate school to finish my degree, determined to build a career on my own terms. Max Jennings was a closed chapter, a name that would only ever exist in court records and dusty archives. Clara let out a small, happy coo, reaching her tiny hand toward a golden leaf that had drifted down from the trees, catching it in her fingers. I smiled, kissing her soft cheek. Let's go home, Clara, I said softly. We turned and walked down the path, leaving the shadows of the past behind us, stepping forward into the bright, clean warmth of the morning sun.